Yes. Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens last tore the house down at Royal Rumble. And oh god, it was everything it needed to be. It had to be brutal. It had to be violent. It had to be cruel. It had to be dark. And sure enough, it was. Now, honestly, we can't go as dark and violent like, say, multiple steel chair shots to the head and Rock and McFoley style, because concussion protocols is one thing, concussion protocols, and also because WWE can't really afford that anymore. Well, they can, but they just don't want to afford, breaking equipment like that. But they'll break equipment on LED boards because that's more expensive. Because that's cheaper in their eyes, I think. But yeah, so Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns have their last man standing match at Royal Rumble. In a previous video on WrestleVerse, I covered the brilliance of the feud, how much they're so similar to each other, and yet having such a strong difference between each other with how they're being portrayed on TV, especially since Roman's turned heel. And to be quite honest, this feud would work better to be, Roman Reigns' opposite, the same man, the dark reflection. And if Roman Reigns was a face and Kevin Owens was the heel, and they did it correctly like they did with this one, I could honestly see this being Roman Reigns' dark reflection, or KO's dark reflection, staring back at him. The Batman to his Joker, the Kota Ibushi to their Jay Whitehall. And I felt like this was basically the best match they could produce. And sure enough, they went all out on this, pun intended. And they did everything they could to brutalize each other in this match. And since Jey Uso's been out because he apparently is either injured or probably hidden, or they're covering up the fact that he's probably sick because, he's not champion, therefore he's not important. At least in Vince's twisted world. So, yeah. So it's Paul Heyman, Roman Reigns taking on Kevin Owens, essentially. And it was everything it needed to be for this match. It had to be brutal. It had to be violent. They had to smash each other with the LED boards, just repeat callbacks to their feud and how it's gone so far. And then they did... Okay, so there's a moment in the match where everyone was like, oh, I recognize that. That's what AEW did. Where Roman Reigns rams Kevin Owens with a golf cart, and everyone immediately, including Matt Hardy, were like, hey, that's our thing. And I was thinking to myself, and Matt Hardy was just, I think Matt Hardy was making a joke. I don't think he meant legit serious anger with it, because that would be kind of stupid, because this is the wrestling industry. It's pretty tough to come up with something original these days, but especially with how much creative bankruptcy there's been. But I did say this about the whole thing. I said Roman Reigns is about murderous intent and darkness, whereas Matt Hardy's little stunt was about being entertainingly comedic, which worked. So I say that was a success. And yeah, and Roman Reigns does this weird dramaticness eventually, where he starts getting on his knees, kind of, and was like screaming to the heavens, which obviously heralded the return of the Messiah. Yeah. And mentioning how his grandfather's looking down at him, and Kevin Owens tackles and mounts Reigns, unloading and calling him an SOB, because we have to have Kevin Owens be a Stone Cold impersonator. The crowd pops. Not really. It's Tyson Kidd's fault. You can blame him for the artificial crowd. And Kevin Owens responds how his grandfathers are more of a man than Reigns will ever be. I mean, didn't you beat him on only 3 occasions, and that required help from Jericho, Braun Strowman, but we can't acknowledge Jericho, because if we do, then we acknowledge AEW, and AEW is the devil of wrestling according to Vince's psyche, much like how fans see Vince as the devil essentially these days of wrestling. But yeah, Then Owens lands a pop-up powerbomb on top of a production truck, and then he climbs out of a group of cases and then nails a frog splash that puts Reigns to the table, trying to or a twist or a swan dive. So essentially, he's trying to steal man Jeff Hardy's thing. Reigns is still down, and here's the thing I loved about this: they make it so convincing. Roman makes it very convincing that he could actually lose the title. He's that good of a seller right now, I think. He's really improved since then. And he's bleeding, and it's just... And Roman makes it back up to 9. And then there's the moment where he gets handcuffed, to call back to their steel cage match, where it looks like, oh, wait, could this actually... Wait, Kevin Owens is thinking smart? My God. What were they thinking? And Kevin Owens handcuffs him to the ground so he can hold him up. So basically, he watched the tapes of Gargano and Ciampa, where Gargano did have him beat, but for two things were different. One, he had Ciampa handcuffed to something that he could easily get down to, and thus break the count. And Gargano got consumed by his desire for vengeance. And yeah, and when Roman was cuffed so low he couldn't make it to his feet, you really did think, oh my God, could Kevin Owens actually win like they did with TLC? And then the ref gets laid out by Roman Reigns, who grabs the ref by the belt and the pants and smashes him into an LED board, which I'm pretty sure that referee is now going to sue them for this. And then Kevin Owens attacks, but Reigns drops him with a low blow. The fans are bringing Reigns, and Heyman comes out over with a key, and yeah, another referee runs over to help the original as the new referee is coming out to count as Heyman tries to get the Reigns free, but he's having trouble. It was confirmed that there was an error there was a botch with the handcuffs, but honestly, I thought it worked. Yeah, there were some people I saw that said they disagree with how that kind of bogged down the match a bit. But I was like, it kind of works for me because I'm probably too forgiving on that. Because Roman's storyline has been pretty consistently good. I'm pretty sure, really look at it. Considering what the way it was looked, I thought that was intentional at first. I thought it was intentional when they did that. And I was thinking... So did they really get the handcuffs trapped in there, or did Kevin Owens get told you need to be as convincing as possible that you could win, even though you're not going to win? But it turns out it was a botch, and they didn't have bolt cutters, which is a question I have for entirely different reasons, though. Okay, so they'll have bolt cutters for when Miz and R-Truth attack after 10 minutes. But they don't have bolt cutters for how many times? Wait, in fact, that always bugged me now these days. So you mean to tell me the officials, the management, never were like, hey, we've had so many angles and segments and matches where they keep having handcuffs on people. Why don't we have a pair of bolt cutters lying around? I mean, like for after the match or before the match, or like when we do the War Games thing. Why don't we have any of that? And sure enough, to this day, I don't think they ever gave a proper answer. They instead opt for the we're dumb route. So Roman Reigns gets out of the chokehold of a handcuff pair after like several minutes, and I was on the edge of my seat, like, wait, could this actually go the other way if this works? If that's the plan, you actually did feel like it could happen. And Roman Reigns gets to his seat. Gets to his feet and then approaches Owens and applies the guillotine chokehold, taking Owens down. And Owens gasping for air and fading away. Roman lets go of the hold and slowly gets back to his feet, but the ref starts counting. Reigns gets up at an 8 count. Owens is still down as the ref makes the 10 count. Roman retains the title with the help of Paul Heyman getting him out of the handcuffs. As such, we have bowed before the tribal chief. And yes, it was everything it needed to be, in my opinion. Brutal, violent as you can be in the PG era, even though they're trying to look like they're phasing towards more of a ruthless aggression approach in recent years, but they're still trying to appease the investors. But you got all this stuff here now, and now there's one major blunder with this match. Not because it happened or how it ended. In fact, the botch is a give or take for fans. It is an acquired taste, I think. It's the fact that it's continuing. Yeah, this should have been the end of the feud. It's continuing. On SmackDown just after the Royal Rumble, Edge looks like he's going to challenge Roman Reigns because Roman Reigns demands acknowledgement. Then Kevin Owens drops him with a stunner, and I was like, oh, God, you ruined what could have been the perfect endgame for that feud. Now you have it continuing, and then you realize, oh, wait, there are 2 more months to go to, and you also have 2 big pay-per-view events. Even though you could just sell for 1 and read the rest all building to it, to WrestleMania. But, yeah, so I don't know what's exactly going to happen. I don't know if Roman's going to be in the Elimination Chamber matchup, or are they just going to sell for, Roman taking on Kevin Owens again. But honestly, this is where the feud should have stopped at. And Roman moves on to like some filler arcs for a little bit in order to prepare for most likely Edge at WrestleMania, or if they have a backup plan. Since, The Rock can't do it because Hollywood's horrible, and plus because of the pandemic, and therefore Rock doesn't want to do it unless it's for a big, big event. And 100,000 people in a stadium is probably the best way to go about that. We'll have to wait 2 more years. Only if Rock's able to do it at that point. So, yeah, this was a classic last man standing match. I loved every minute of it. I enjoyed it. It was just absolute insanity involved, and I loved how they managed to try and be as convincing as possible to make it look like it could go the other way. I commend WWE for that, and Roman Reigns for selling it so well. Oh, and Roman Reigns actually being a smart heel. Well, where if he can't get up, he has to take down the ref. You don't see that as much anymore. So, yeah. So, there. I praise something WWE related. There. I gave people what they wanted. I gave them something WWE praised for in the modern times and not something from like 5 or 10 years ago. There. So, can we end the argument that I'm a pessimistic... Well, actually, I am very pessimistic, but that's for much different reasons. But, it's mostly because I look at Roman Reigns' stuff, Bray Wyatt's stuff, and Drew McIntyre's stuff as the only consistently great things about the main shows of WWE, where NXT is kind of trying to read its own thing, but then Vince is, putting his fingers in the pie and ruining it a little bit. Because shock value is apparently going to be the thing that beats AEW, even though AEW clearly has a plan. And whatnot. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns, classic last man standing match. It could have been more violent, but we're not in the TV-14 days of WWE, so we can't get that. Like I said, this is a feud that really should have stopped at the Royal Rumble, so it's disappointing a little bit that they are continuing it. We'll have to see where they take that, but I honestly thought Roman Reigns should just do the Elimination Chamber match and then subsequently do a filler match for Fastlane, maybe fight Rey Mysterio or hell Buddy Murphy, give them something to do to get rid of all the blunder that was the Seth Rollins stuff and what was supposed to be the Baron Corbin stuff before Steve Cutler got fired. I almost did make a video regarding that, but I just opted not to. I did it on my podcast. This was Near Reality Entertainment presenting the WrestleVerse. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, check out my channels in the content and descriptions below and search them up on the search bar. Stay tuned for more. I'll see y'all next time. Peace and take care, everyone. And also acknowledge the tribal chief. You're reigning, defending, all showing, universal champion, Roman Reigns.